Have you been watching the strike on the docks? Did you know the average worker there gets 40 bucks an hour, makes 80 grand a year. Now if they do overtime, they can make up to 300 grand a year. Nice pocket change. They want almost a 70% raise, so they'll go from 40 to $70 an hour, and they want no automation. The company has offered 50% wage increase over the next 7 years and a little bit of automation, whatever that little bit is. That's quite interesting. The union president, which I believe is voted in by the people, um, is quite cocky, and everybody's twisting his words. And he's over there saying he'll shut the country down if he's got to. And they're playing it over and over. And look, this guy's elected to fight for those people. Not us, but for those people that pay him. And he's doing his job, period. And the funny thing is people are taking it offensive and everybody's spinning it different directions. My father back in the day, wow, we can go back to when I was like 16 years old and I'm 60 now. My father worked in a steel factory. He drove crane and they had a union. And anytime they went on strike quite a few times when I was a kid growing up. I heard the word scab mentioned quite a lot. I even heard my father sitting at the kitchen table explaining that it's a good way to die. And he wasn't kidding. He was very, very serious. If they allowed a truck driver or somebody to cross that line, that meant their job, their way of life, feeding their family, their kids, was gone. And they weren't going to have it. A lot of things went on back then. I mean, way back then, you had mafia that was actually union leaders. They were tapping into that. I mean, if you go back and watch the old videos on mafia, you'll see quite a bit has to do with the unions. There's a lot of history back there. But a union was the only way a man could get a raise and not be treated like a slave. Very few men back then had education. I think my dad had grade 8. I mean, he didn't have very much education. And he was even afraid of heights, and he worked in a crane. And I asked my dad years later, why are you working in a crane if you're afraid of heights? He says, because everybody leaves me alone up there. He says, every day I climb up that ladder to get in that crane, I'm hanging on that ladder for dear life until I get inside the crane. But one thing's for sure, I can remember back in those days when they had the unions and they had the picket lines and even in the middle of winter in January back then in Canada, it was much colder, and it was hard times because you didn't make the same wage. You got a union wage, which I can't remember what that was, but it wasn't very much. I know we didn't eat very good back then when he was on strike. But everybody's twisting this. You got right side twisting it, left side twisting it, and it all depends how you look at it. I think it's amazing that they're standing up and fighting. And if people don't start fighting, they're going to be destroyed. They're going to be homeless. This is the first people versus AI fight. Are they going to win? When Amazon kept bringing in AI and Amazon kept bringing in robots, those dummies that worked there should have brought in a union immediately. And they should have slowed that progress down. They would have saved their asses from getting fired. But they didn't. They were too afraid. Now, I think some places do have a union. And a lot of people will complain and yell and say unions are no good for a company. Companies close down. Look, if a company does not treat its employees properly, they need a union. And that's all there is to it. If they look at their employees as numbers and not as people, and not as families and not as kids going to baseball games. They need a union. And that's all there is to it. Hate me if you will, but through my entire life, from what I've seen, when they've slowly abolished the unions in many places, I noticed that the people's wages didn't go up anymore, the cost of living, they just slowly became more into being a slave, is what happened. And that's the sad part. But there is power in numbers. There always has been. And this is a big group of people. Now, are we going to pay the penalty? I don't know if that's such a bad thing, but yes, we will. We will pay more for groceries. We will pay more. They say in a recession. I thought we were already in a recession. And they're acting like, oh, things are going to go up. And Biden's over there saying he's not going to intervene. I'll bet you he does intervene sooner or later because the companies are saying they want him to intervene. So that means the company's not going to make a deal. They're going to push Biden into intervening. And as soon as he does, well, guess what? That's 45,000 plus votes he just lost. Because if Biden does, they're not going to vote for him. And that's a big thing. So if Biden sticks his nose in there, which I advise he doesn't, and he just lets it play out, then that's the way it is. But they're not lying when they say the company's making billions. It's a lot more than billions that they're making. You know, the one thing I didn't agree with when I was watching the videos was the one guy said, well, during COVID, we went to work every day risking our lives. It seems very low educated because there were very many nurses and doctors and a lot of people that were on the line risking their lives a lot closer to it than what they were. And they act like they deserve some compensation. I don't know. But one thing's for sure that I'm watching. This is AI versus man. Automation versus man. I have never seen in my entire life automation ever beaten. Ever. I have seen companies close completely to open something else to keep their automation. So they're definitely looking over their situations, these CEOs, and they're willing to let the country hurt. They could make the deal and say, fine, no automation for 7 years. Here's your 70% raise, and the country goes back to work, and they wait 7 years before figuring out what they're going to do. They could do that. But they don't want to do that. You see, and this is the problem. The management is looking at the employees as a battle, like a war, and not as family. And that's the sad part. So part of this is to make you take sides. Is the union good? Is the union bad? And that's what they're forcing people to do. When you start paying more at the pump again, you start paying more for groceries again, will you see what they're doing, how they're fighting the AI? Because if they win and automation is not allowed, this is the first step in history, which means if enough people come together, they can prevent the growth of the AI. And I don't know if that's the way to go, but it definitely is interesting to see which way this is going to go. Which way you think it's going to go? You think they're going to agree to some automation? Or do you think they're just going to stick it out to the end? Or do you think the CEOs are going to... And you need to look at what CEOs get paid. It's ridiculous. I don't know. I've never understood why a CEO gets paid 40, 80, $120 million to do a job. I've never understood that. I never made sense to me. But maybe I'm just not that educated. But the funny thing about this is, if they win, it shows that when people come together, they can stop the AI and slow it down. I don't think they can remove it completely, but I think they can slow it down. But you also hear the government saying, nothing to worry about yet. You don't have to go crazy and buy stuff. You'll hear that too. When the government tells you not to go crazy and buy stuff, that means get your ass out there and start buying stuff. Anything is perishable. Bananas, tomatoes, peppers, all this stuff is going to double in price. Mark my words. It's sitting out there on those ships and it's going to go rotten. And they're going to start raising the prices. You can always bring home peppers, chop them up and freeze them. You can always just throw tomatoes in a Ziploc, throw them down and freeze them. There's a lot of things you can do to preserve the vegetables before they go up in price. And it's probably going to be the start. I even seen people in the comment post saying, oh, great, we're not paying China no more. Well, there's more than China there. I mean, there's Vietnam, there's Taiwan. I mean, a lot of goods come from all over the world in trade and everything we do. I don't think most of us even have a clue what's going on. We just know we order our stuff on Amazon and it's here in a day, which is kind of nice. But we are going to pay more. So do we pay more and do we stand behind those guys and say, yes, keep fighting, keep fighting. Don't let the AI win. Or do we say, look, you make enough money. You make more than most people that work at McDonald's. The McDonald's workers looking at that going, man, I wish I made 80 grand a year. So shut up and go back to work. All depends where you stand. But I'm sure there's going to be a separation here, just like everything else, because everybody in the U.S. is always separated. They're never together. And companies really, really like that. Just something to think about. Catch you on the next one.